What was your fuck this shitty I'm out moment? Some young woman and an old lady were arguing about stolen underwear in our communal laundry room. Young woman called for her cracked out boyfriend who came running in with a gun drawn screaming bloody murder. Noped right out. Then moved out that weekend. I was hired as a temp. On day 91 I was told that they in fact didn't have to hire me after 90 days and they were gonna keep me on as a temp. I clocked out for lunch and never went back. I have a friend who worked as a temp for the same company. In the same position. For 6 f***ing years. She worked in an industry where there weren't many jobs so they kind of had her over a barrel. And they knew it. Vultures. Man. Me and my brother were chilling outside a 711 talking to a homeless guy and he offered to take us into an alley and let us try some crack. Still not sure if he wanted to rob us. Let us try his crack. Or let us try his crackle mayo. Some promoter literally gave me $80 to go into his Vegas strip club with my friends. Said he would throw in the limo and VIP package if we tipped the driver because his other reservation cancelled. When we got there, we got different color wristbands than other people and were told we could only leave their taxi when we left. That was our only option. One friend tried to leave and the bouncer wouldn't let him out. He came back and told us what was up. Nothing was adding up so we booked it out of the fire exit and down the street. That was how I got paid $80 to go a strip club. Pretty sure we were going to get robbed when we left and would probably have been drunk. I worked at Produce Market when I was in college. I really needed the job. I literally had empty cabinets and only one shelf of food in the fridge on a regular basis. I had been working weekday evenings only for a couple of months. But picked up a Saturday shift. I was helping a customer and the owner walked up and interrupted our conversation. Is that your yellow car in parking lot? Me. Yes. Her. With the most demeaning tone. On weekends. Our parking lot is reserved for customers only. If you value your job you will go punch out. Move your car to the lot across the street. And never park in the lot again. I was astonished. I had full-time jobs every summer since I was 15. I picked up holiday jobs. I had a lot of working experience. I had never been talked to like this by any co-worker or boss before. Particularly in front of a customer. I told her I was not aware of the parking rules since I always worked weekdays. Took off my apron. Handed it to her and said I will be punching out. But not punching back in. I quit. I told the customer I was sorry I was not able to finish helping him and walked out. I really needed the job. But was so pissed off I could not stand the idea of working there. My supervisor called me that afternoon and tried to get me to come back. But I just couldn't. I was unemployed and had a job interview for a cable installer position. The position advertised for $20 an hour. 40 plus hours a week. And benefits, so it seemed like a pretty good deal. I get to the interview and find out it's actually 2 interviews. A group interview followed by one-on-one interviews with the hiring manager. In the group interview, HM explains that the position was actually minimum wage and commission. He also explains that we need to supply our own tools. He then tells us how they assign jobs and we have no choice over which ones we get. Right before the end of the group interview, one of the other guys asks if there were any other expenses we were responsible for and HM tells us that we had to pay for our own gas, tires and repairs on our assigned company van. I look out in the parking lot and saw all the vans look like 20-year-old clapped out pieces of crap. As soon as HM went back to his office, I left. I'm a middle school teacher. And it's also worth mentioning that I'm a very petite woman and most of my students are bigger than me. Many years ago when I was considered one of the young and pretty teachers, I was walking down the hall. An 8th grade boy slapped me on the ass and mentioned my car's make and model, implying that he was going to wait for me in the parking lot. I immediately went to my principal who told me that reporting the incident would reflect poorly on me and I don't want a complaint like that in my file. Double quote. I put in my resignation from that particular school the next day. The more I mention it, the more I realize that many teachers have similar experiences. I was roofing and getting paid by the day. After a few months I asked to get paid piecework. My pay for that week was about double and the boss said he had to put me back to daily rate next week. I said goodbye and started my own business. Was in a forest with a few friends having some fun being oblivious kids. We had just crossed a small river with a large incline on both sides. We go to the other side and started to walk. I looked at a tree and stopped. I still have no clue what made me feel like stopping. A guy in full grey clothes stepped out from behind the tree and pulled what looked like a gun from his back. For people that may ask, it was just a handgun. Safe to say me and my friends ran as fast as we could without looking back through the forest, crossing the river without caring about the makeshift bridge we built, and ran straight through. When we got out I realized how bad that could have been. Went with a friend to visit his dad and look for possible jobs in Chicago. While my friend was out job hunting the third day, his dad asked if I wanted to go to a bar with him. Sure. So we go to this hole in the wall of a bar. Legit down and alley and backdoor style entered this dark small room with a 6-foot bar. I'm already questioning whether I should have stayed or left, but here comes the kicker. We get a couple beers from the bartender, who was a super nice guy. Nothing weird about him until his question. Joining or viewing? My friend's dad cracked and smiled and smacked my back and said just viewing. The guy walks us over to another door and opens it, leading us into a much larger room. And if you haven't guessed it yet, there were about 15 people in the middle of an orgy. Pure exhibition that I was not prepared for at 12:30 PM on a Tuesday. FCK this shitty, I'm out. Caught an Uber back and everything. I was working a particularly awful nursing home as a CNA. I was bullied by some of the other CNAs as well as one terrible nurse. I put up with it for a year and put in my 2W notice. I only told management, not the other staff. On my second to last day there, that nurse decided to scream in my face about some imaginary infraction. About an hour later I learned that the company that had bought the facility earlier in the year had decided anyone who'd been working there less than a year on the sale date would not get any vacation days. I'd also only be getting half my sick days paid out when I quit. That meant 5 days of pay. And I learned that if I didn't complete my 2 weeks of notice, I'd forfeit those 5 days. I realized 5 days of pay wasn't worth the abuse I was having to endure, and I told the Don at the end of that day that I was never coming back. She tried to talk me into it, but it didn't work. So that's my fuck this shit, I'm out story. I was at a party. It was a bunch of suburban teenagers like myself at the time. There was this dude I didn't recognize walking around and acting super hard, even though he was really scrawny. He finally got to me and was like, "Yo, I got AK-47s for sale. You want one?" I was like, "Dude, shut up. You ain't got shit." He takes me out to his car and opens the trunk. It is full of guns piled on top of one another. Handguns, assault rifles, shotguns, you name it. I ended up sneaking out, hopping in my car and heading home. This dude ended up being a known foot soldier type for a gang out of the nearest big city. He got arrested a few days later when he got stopped for speeding. The cops searched his car and found the guns. He was only 16. Set the Wayback Machine to the year 2000. All of my friends threw a millennium party. Apparently it was a Rager. Nobody tells me about it at all, because the mother of my child is bringing her side guide to it. Finally a couple weeks later one of them tells me that it even happened and what went down. Wrote the whole lot of them off. Spoke to almost none of them again. Best thing I ever did. Did a similar thing in 2002. Not because of any one thing, that group did, more like they were all kind of weird and cliquish. Later I found out they had all been doing meth, and that's why I felt excluded. Which oddly made me feel kind of relieved. Like I'm not crazy. Relieved. I was about 17 and lived in a rural area. Used to hitchhike everywhere. One day I'm in the back of a car. 2 guys up front. They're talking kinda quiet. After a minute or 2 I hear one say, "Okay, but this time we'll go somewhere else." Then he looks in the mirror at me. I looked away out the window. Proper shitting my pants. As we went through a village we had to stop at a junction and I blurted something about a friend living nearby and I opened that door and ran. Probably nothing in it but I still get chills remembering it. When my boss told me I didn't have the nerve to quit my job. Handed my notice in 10 minutes after he said it. I had worked out a partial work from home agreement. Because I was planning on becoming a foster parent, with plans to adopt. When we were notified of a placement, my boss became a complete dick. Handing me a new contract that was hellish. I had no plans to radically change the direction of my life and quit my job. But then my boss asked me why I hadn't signed it yet. And I told him I was still thinking about it. He shook his head and said, "You don't have a choice." Double quote. Oh yes. I did. And I exercised that choice. FCKU Pete. You were a terrible boss and a complete dump of an employee. A while back I was getting my food at a McDonald's drive-thru after school. This McDonald's shared half the building with a gas station. Around the edge of the gas station there were large bushes. I glanced between two pumps near the road outside and see a sketchy dude loading NAR while frantically glancing in random directions. He looked like he was on something and let's just say I got the hell out of there. I don't think he ever shot anybody. But it was still scary. I was on the third date with this guy I really liked. We started making out on his couch. Things started steaming up and that's when it began. The baby voice. He couldn't stop talking to me in a baby voice. I was out. Worked at Walmart. Really busted my ass to get something done, was supposed to get help, no one showed. Upsetting but typical, but at the end of the day instead of a thank you they threatened to write me up over some cardboard I forgot. Had a better paying job before the end of the month. The begging as I walked out the doors that last time was priceless. Few years ago walking around at 3 AM chain smoking cigarettes and feeling sorry for myself. Sit down at a park and approached by an older gentleman. Tells me he just got out of work after a very long day. Sure. We chat for a few minutes. Starts asking me about my father. Not liking where it's going. Sure enough he asks me if I want to suck his cock. Nope. Sire. Bye. Guess I looked like I was out trolling for some daddy. I dated this one guy I'm in college for 2 months. One Saturday night he invites me over to meet his parents. We are having dinner. Talking about random things. After dinner I'm helping his mom wash dishes. She goes to the storage closet on the other side of the house to grab another hand towel. His father comes into the kitchen and asks me, "So I guess tonight we're having a threesome?" I say, "I'm sorry, what?" Mind you, I had already mentioned and explained that I was asexual. He says, "Yeah, it's a tradition BF's name started back when he was a college freshman. Him and I have a threesome with his girlfriend. We were college seniors, 21 at the time." I said nothing. I grabbed my phone and called my friend to pick me up. Thankfully my friend was there in 5 minutes. Never spoke to them again. I was a temp worker in a factory that made mayonnaise. During my break I get a call from my mom's work. She's had 5-6 strokes at the same time. I went to my supervisor and told him what happened. When he replied with, "Can't you wait until your shift is over?" I took off my uniform and left the building without another word. For those who are interested, ER doctors told me my mom only survived because her co-workers reacted fast and because the clumps of blood cutting her blood flow to her brain were rather small. When I was kneeling in goache in a bombed out hut for hours looking for insurgents that didn't exist, decided the army wasn't for me anymore. The F-King platoon sergeant had asked me in the said goache filled hut if I was going to re-enlist. I looked him right in the eye and told him, "Fuck no, I'm done with this shit." Worked for someone who hired her lazy ass brother-in-law as part of my team. I had to do all the work on my own. But not only did he take credit for my work, he threw me under the bus. Boss wanted to upgrade the antiquated system we were using. But the lazy ass said there was nothing wrong with our current system and blamed me for not knowing how to do it right, even though I was the one who made it work at all in the first place. Close bracket. Boss took his word for it and then told me I should learn how to do it properly under lazy ass's guidance. So I said FCK this and I turned in my resignation letter the next day. I offered to help train whoever they were gonna hire to replace me. Boss said, no need. Lazy ass, can handle it. Double quote. Okay then. A couple of months later, I get a text message from my old boss, who has never texted me before, acting like an old friend wanting to catch up before asking me to come back. This happened back when I was in college. Me and my college buddies used to hang out a lot in the forest behind our college. It's a very remote area so you won't find anybody out there. One day we decide to venture deep into the forest for shits and giggles. Nobody knew where we were headed. We kept on going for an hour or so. We then stopped at a clearing to catch some breath. One of our buddies spotted footprints. The weirdest part of the footprints was that it started at one point and ended after a few meters. It's like whoever it was never left this place. It didn't make any sense. At that point everybody was like, okay FCK, that, let's go home. At this outdoor party with some friends, dancing and drinking, someone shoots this guy near us with a shotgun. It was so loud I went deaf for about 3 minutes. I looked down and partially saw the body about 6 feet away from me. The worst part is, the victim's friend then decides to drive through the crowd of people towards the body, meaning there's a car coming straight for me. Imagine being drunk, deaf, and blinded by headlights of a car speeding towards you through a crowd of people after being so close to a fatal shooting. I got out of the way in time, found my friends, and we left that place so fast. No questions asked. When my almost ex-husband, who was abusive since we were teenagers, grabbed my arm and threw me into a door frame while I was holding my 4-month-old daughter. Fuck this shit. I'm out indeed. When I got accused of stealing $25 from the safe at the Subway I worked at, even after they showed me the video of me counting every bill in front of the camera to avoid accusations and putting it all back without the cams losing even an inch of sight on those bills. If I was going to steal, it would be any more than $25. My first job was at a grocery store and my department manager was a f-king asshole. One day he was throwing a fit in the back room and threw a box of red wine vinaigrette dressing to the ground as I was walking past. Broken glass and nasty smelling dressing all over the place. He just turned, named me and said, clean this shit up, to which I was like, nah, I'm out. My mother told me I was a waste in her life 10 years ago. Now I've been living by myself for 10 years. I'm married and about to do a graduate. When I left my boyfriend of 3 years. A little backstory. He was extremely emotionally abusive. Called me a SLT if I wore a form-fitting dress. Said I was ugly for wearing makeup. Couldn't do girls' night out with my friends. I was basically his property. The worst was him threatening to kill himself if I left him. One night he legit got out a knife and slit his throat. But not deep enough to actually go through with it. I felt stuck in the relationship. Then one day, when he called me a usual slut, it just triggered me. Something happened where I just couldn't take it anymore and said, fuck this shit, I'm out. And that was the best decision I've ever made. We were urban exploring an abandoned institute complex and to all of us, and suddenly we turned a corner into a room and oversaw 3 pickup trucks pulling over the institute, and we just rushed the FCK out of the building. If you are Mexican, you will know that those trucks were cartel members probably about to record a video. A friend of a friend invited me to dinner with a few of her friends. They barely introduced themselves to me, then spent the entire time bad-mouthing people I didn't know. I finished eating as soon as I could and left. I was around 14 and I had gotten my first phone. My siblings and I had gone to a restaurant and we came back home at around 12:00 AM. While trying to unlock the door of the house, we heard screams coming from inside the house. We went inside and found my crazy aunt beating the shit out of my 8-year-old cousin while my other cousins were crying and trying to get her to stop. My aunt is a strong woman, so that was really difficult. Eventually I took the metal bat from my backyard and I hit her in the back of the head and knocked her out. My siblings both stared at me, but I just called my dad to pick me up and took my 8-year-old cousin with me. I'd figured that my other 2 cousins would call 911 and then call their own father to pick them up. I guess not, since I was allowed the next day to pack some of my cousins and my own things. We stayed with my dad for about 2 months. Turns out my aunt was mad because he had gotten nail polish on her new shoes.